Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 246. Today, I sit down with the one and only, the great Mike Farrington. I love his stuff. We get asked a lot, what YouTubers do you really love? And I give you a resounding Mike Farrington. I also give you a resounding Tamar Hanna of 3x3 Customs, who is featured in the new issue of Fine Woodworking Magazine. If you're listening to this on Friday when it's released, it should be there Wednesday or Thursday or Friday after. And if you're not a subscriber to Fine Woodworking, or if you're not an unlimited member of Fine Woodworking, where you get the magazine and all of the web content, you really should think about it. I get a lot of emails from people saying that they're subscribers or unlimited members as a way of helping to thank us for producing this show. And I really, really appreciate that. And I love the fact that not only are you helping support the show and Mike and Barry and Anissa and myself, you're getting really top-notch woodworking content in return. And I think it's a really good trade, right? Yeah. All right. Without further ado, Mike Farrington. So normally I go through and edit all of the questions into an easier to read version, but I didn't do that because a little bit before this podcast recording, Barry from work came over and helped me think through a couple of things on a project that I'm working on. And it really got me thinking how lucky I am to be able to just call someone up or be at lunch with someone and just say, hey, what would you do here? Or what are the downsides here and there? Do you have a woodworking buddy? Do you have people or have you always just been on your own? You're kind of in the sticks as far as I can tell. You just told me you have to plow 2 miles of driveway or whatever. So, is that something that I take for granted?
Yes. You take it for granted. Having somebody to lean on is super important on a delivery day. If you have something big, it's really nice to be able to call somebody up and sort of swap favors. I wish I had a little bit more of that. Since moving to Denver, I've made a couple of friends, but they live reasonably far away. And they have lives of their own. So it's not like on a Wednesday at 2 p.m, I could be like, hey, can you cruise on over? In the past, I've had some people who lived a little closer to me who were willing to swap favors. They were also contractors. Mm-hmm. So on a tiling day, I might go help them. On a cabinet delivery day, they'd come over and help me. You got to have somebody. Working alone is great, but at some point in time, things get too big and heavy for just one person.
But even just thinking through the steps of a project or anything, have you ever been like when you lived in San Diego?
Sure.
Was there a guild that you would go to, or you were just you always had to figure it out on your own?
I'm a lone wolf. Honestly, yeah. I don't like asking for help. I do it as little as possible. That might be a personality flaw. I need to go look in the mirror and sort out or something. There are guilds. I'm actually a member of the guild here in Denver. I occasionally attend a meeting. The problem is they're Tuesday at 7:00. It's like I got dinner and dishes and bedtime and all that other stuff. Yeah. So if you are a woodworker and if you have some free time, making friends who are also woodworkers in a guild is a great place to do that. Is invaluable because there's always the one guy in the guild who's got the 20-inch wide joiner and the 400 horsepower, 48-inch planer, because they're into tools or whatever. And knowing that guy's great, occasionally you can, and most of the time they're very, very happy to help. Just any excuse to, fire up the old planer. Yeah. So I would strongly recommend that people do that. Going it alone, it just makes it a little harder. Yeah. Yeah. It's just something that I was thinking, was like, this is so great to be able to call someone. And I think that's what the internet has turned into for many people. Instagram, I see many people asking for advice on Instagram or whatever, but I I am grateful to be in a position to have that. And I was just curious. I'll tell you this. I was sort of just, I'm thinking about the question a little more now. I was sort of talking about the physical side of things. lifting something, maybe
Yeah.
they have a specific tool. But there's also kind of the mental side of things. Woodworking is often problem solving. And yeah, if you could sit down once a week or whatever with some woodworking buddies at lunch or something like that and chat, you could bounce ideas off people. And I think that would be maybe even more important than having access to, friends' tools.
Yeah. For me, it was, hey, Barry, can you come over and look at this project? Do you think I need to add this filler block? And he was saying, no, I think it's fine without it. Or, hey, I was going to apply the drawer fronts this way. And then we actually talked through a few different options and wound up somewhere in the middle. And that's the thing that I think if I lived somewhere else and had a different job where this was quite honestly part of my job, talking to other woodworkers, I would really, really miss it. Help with design, help with problem solving, jig making, any of that stuff would be, you are in a very idea rich environment, and working alone, well, you got to solve all those problems on your own. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of problems and questions, we have a few. My Farrington folder overfloweth. We've got 4 or 5 here today, and I think we're going to have to kick in another one in a little bit. But this first question is from Adam. Recently, I took on the project of refacing my mother's kitchen. This included making something like 45 doors or drawer fronts of about 30 different sizes. I've tried to run as many parts through a process whenever I can with machine setup to make sure that everything matches and to reduce machine setups. This has created a lot of partly completed parts all over the shop. My solution has been each door size gets a letter to identify it using blue tape and a bundle of single sets of parts and labels. However, this whole project has had me thinking about how to stay organized with big projects. I would love to hear any tips or tricks and general discussion about how you stay organized with large projects. I've seen some overwhelming projects on your end there.
Yeah, organizations is tough. A lot of it will depend on your shop, your tools, how big your shop is. Mm-hmm. I've always worked, and by the way, I've used kind of these same methods in tiny shops all the way up to my current shop, which is, pretty decent size. I always organize parts by the process that's going to be done to the part next, or the process that's currently being done to that part.
Okay.
So let's say he mentioned 45 doors or drawer fronts. I would say that rails and stiles would be broken into 2 piles of parts. You're going to have 2 of each one, but there's 2 different machine processes. There's going to be a cope, and then there's going to be a cope and a stick to the second set of parts. That's why I would break them into 2 piles. I've always had, are those, they're called furniture dollies. You got the 4 wheels, they're low to the ground. Mm-hmm. So I'll stack parts on furniture dollies. Door parts I might put on a cart. And sometimes I even put a pencil line across the cart where I know on the left side is where all the rails, the right side is all the stiles. And again, it's all by what the next step to that part is. So if you're building cabinets, you're breaking down sheet goods, you got left and right sides, you've got tops and bottoms, and you've got backs. That would be 3 different piles of parts. If you need to keep each part separate, I would use blue tape and just, a quick little mark on the blue tape. If you're using melamine, you can actually just use permanent marker, and then lacquer thinner takes it right off. So there's a quick pro tip. Yeah. So, parts get stacked. There's one kind of downside to that. And that's if you have one of many that you're making where the parts are huge compared to the other ones. So if you have a pantry door where, the stiles are 70 inches or something like that. And then all of your other ones are just normal 30-inch or smaller parts. That can get a little annoying. I try and lean those against a wall, but I always kind of have a mental reference knowing that those, need just the cope or whatever. Mm-hmm. So carts, piles, and then always think in terms of process. I go miles out of my way to not have to set up a tool twice.
Yeah.
So when it comes time to cope, or when it comes time to stick, or when it comes time to do anything, the machine gets set up one time and one time alone, and I do every part. Now, there's one hiccup in that, and that is when I make a mistake. It happens. So I usually along the lines make a few extra. When it comes to cutting cabinet parts, I usually make sure to have an extra half a sheet of material whereby I can come back and recut a side if I did something wrong. When it comes time to making doors or drawers, same deal. I'll always have a few extra feet, maybe even as much as 8 feet of extra material that I can just come back. It's been milled to the same thickness. It's been ripped to the same width. I just have it in a big long length. So if I mess up something, I can come back and just chop off another piece, and I don't have to go all the way back to the beginning and mill up some lumber from a fresh start.
So if you're doing cope and stick doors, would you cope that as well? Just because regardless it's getting coped, right?
Yeah, I might even run a couple of extra copes and a couple of extra sticks just in case.
Okay.
And that might mean just, coping one side or something. I mean, who knows? But the point is I try and run a couple of extra parts. Just because, I hate to say it, but you drop one on the ground and it dents the side horribly or something. It's, so extra parts will help. I don't know. What else? What did I miss?
So you don't do a whole kitchen of cabinets anymore, right? That was a past life for you, right?
Occasionally I will. I probably do one a year now, something like that.
Do you dread those jobs?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It's that simple.
They're hard. They're brutal. They're physically very demanding. But for the right customer, they work well. The people are always very appreciative. You got to pick your customers right though. And they can be really fun too, in a certain way. You put the whole thing together, you build this kitchen, there's just boxes everywhere. There's just drawer boxes, there's hardware. You take it over and you install it all. And it is a neat feeling, that's a big chunk of the value of a house that you've helped out with. So, but no, I don't do a ton of them anymore.
What would constitute, just to go a little off subject, what would constitute the right customer? Is it,
first and foremost is patient. I work alone. I can't turn a kitchen out in 2 weeks. There are plenty of shops out here who can, but I need, a really big kitchen for me could be 2 months. A medium, smaller size could be 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And that's from collecting a check to putting the last little piece of crown molding up or whatever. Mm-hmm. So they need to be patient, and then, they kind of need to, I charge a little bit more than other people, but I do very high quality work. And so the person needs to understand that, and they need to want that.
Yeah.
If they, are calling me up trying to chip me on price, it's that's kind of not what I do. I'm doing really nice work. I'm really delivering a nice product.
Yeah.
And as such, I just need to charge for that. So those two things they need to have the right budget, and they need to have the right timeline in mind.
So you're not, or you probably wouldn't do a kitchen for an unknown client.
I wouldn't do anything for an unknown client.
But like somebody just randomly calls you. You wouldn't want to set aside 2 months of your time for someone not knowing.
Usually in that situation, I invite them over to the shop and we sit down and have a chit chat. This way I don't have to go to their place. They could also come over to my shop. I can show them stuff. They can kind of see, feel, and touch stuff versus the weird contractor who shows up at your house and knocks on the door. He's 20 minutes late. Who is this guy? If they see the shop, they see the work. It's much more tangible, and that's a more powerful sales tool.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. I do everything I can to keep people from coming over to my place.
Well,
except Barry.
I get that too, but it's not like I have a ton of, I do this occasionally, not 3 times a week or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Interesting. Very interesting. I feel like I've done, in regards to large projects, I've got, I'm in the process of probably my largest project in a while. And I had actually thought about, before starting it, like actually making a cart to keep the cases on, because I'll eventually have 6 cases for this project that I'm doing, and it's gonna just take up half of my shop, it feels like.
Furniture dollies are great for that, and they're kind of a bummer because if you have to work on the lowest, the lower case, you're down on your hands and knees. But at the same time, typically you can go 3 high with them, and so in terms of like square footage, it ends up reducing the amount of square footage in your shop that a set of cases will take up.
How many carts do you have around your shop? I mean, pros just seem to have.
I have 20 at least furniture dollies, and then I have like probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 different random carts. Actually, I'm getting ready to go through and remake a few carts that I want to add some functionality to. But yeah, I mean, at least 20 furniture dollies. And on a big kitchen, absolutely, I'll use every single one of those, and it'll be stacked 3 high on every one.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope you make a video of the cart, of the shop cart.
Yeah. So actually, I've made a couple of really big furniture dollies. So I kind of went and bought my own casters that have the wheel locks on them.
Yeah.
One of the other bummers about the furniture dollies is like, as you're trying to push on it, it's like rolling away from you.
Yeah.
So I got some casters that have locks, and then I made them like 42 inches wide or whatever, and 27 deep, so that even larger pieces of furniture can sit on them. That's super convenient. And then I'm going to make kind of a medium height cart that's like thigh high, maybe a little lower for working on big stuff. And then I'm going to make another cart, like almost like a secondary workbench that I'll use as kind of a parts cart as I walk around my shop. And, I'm fortunate to have some more space. So having a really big surface to work on and spread out your parts is, a luxury that, well, I'd like to take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. So, this next question is from Michael. Let's see. Michael is debating. He's setting up his shop. I am soon to embark upon the construction of my own small, semi-professional shop after several years of working in a shop shared with the adherents of the gods of iron and steel, whose grease invades every corner of my space. My conundrum is this. I regularly work with sheet goods in the existing shop on an old unisaw, which can be cumbersome. I have also used a track saw to make initial cuts, simplifying the issue, but not eliminating it. In the new shop, I am planning on installing a slider, which I am familiar with from spending time long ago in a large professional shop. However, SawStop makes a beautiful product that is beautifully half the money of any slider worth having in a production capacity. So there are advantages of a cabinet. Are there advantages of a cabinet saw that I'm overlooking? Are there ways around the problems of a cabinet saw which I'm ignorant? Doubtless, I'm looking for justification for my desire to purchase a large slider, but I would be quite happy to be proven false and pocket the extra $5,000. So, as a man with a slider and what do you have? You have an old Powermatic 66 or something. Yeah. Once people get a Powermatic 66, they don't get rid of them, do they?
I've told myself 100 times, if a really good deal comes up on a SawStop, I'd buy it, but I don't want to pay the full price for it. And then the other thing that I tell myself, which I've come to the conclusion is never going to happen, is that when the old Powermatic 66 kicks the dust, I'll invest. It's never going to break. That thing will never, ever, ever, ever break.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good old saws. Mine is one of the later American made versions. So it's made in like, I think 84 or something like that. I think by 1990, those were all overseas. And you just feel it. Great castings, just quality is there for sure.
Yeah. So what's the difference for you? Why have both?
There is no doubt in my mind that breaking down sheet goods on a sliding table saw is easier, it's more accurate, and it is way safer too. It's safer, I don't think, in a sense of like necessarily cutting off a finger or kickback, but it's safer in the sense that you're just doing a lot less lifting, so there's probably a lower chance of a back injury. If you have the right cart set up, you can just slide a sheet good onto the sliding carriage portion of the sliding table saw, scoot it into position, and start making cuts. It's really fast. It's really accurate. And if you have the space, the key is not even the money so much as the space. Sliding table saw will pay for itself in a job or two. It's the space. You need 20 feet. I mean, at a minimum, you need maybe 18 feet. If you figure a piece of plywood is 8 feet long, you need the diameter of the blade plus 8 feet on one side, and then you need the diameter of the blade plus 8 feet on the other side. So, I mean, they just take up oceans of real estate. I would encourage this guy if he, what's his name? Michael, great name.
Yeah.
I would encourage him to go with a sliding table saw. If he has the space, that's great. If he has the space and the money, I would encourage him to get both. The problem with a sliding table saw is versus a cabinet saw is it's not comfortable to rip down solid wood. So if he's making face frames, using a sliding table saw for that is just, it's annoying because you have to reach across the sliding carriage. So essentially you're, say, 20 inches or so reaching out with your right arm and like a push stick or even your hand to try and run your 1.5 inches or your 2 inch or your 5 inch or whatever pieces of solid wood by that blade. So the sliding table saw is great at breaking down plywood, but it struggles a little bit when dealing with solid wood.
These are the type of things that nobody would ever know without spending not hours, not weeks, but months behind a slider. I would never think of the ergonomics of ripping solid wood stock. And so you're not necessarily like when you're a pro, you're not necessarily thinking about how easy it is to do things 2 times. You're thinking about how easy it is to do things 2,000 times. Oh,
yeah, for sure. So I have a feeling if there's a comment section or whatever, a listener's going to say this. Well, I have a sliding table saw and I cut solid wood on it all the time and I don't know what the big fuss is. Mm-hmm. Well, to that person, I would say go get 35 pieces of pick your species that are 10 feet long or 8 feet long and try and rip 2-inch strips off of them. And a piece that's close to final size, like let's say your final size part is 2.5 inches wide by 31 inches long. That's actually not that bad to deal with on a sliding table saw because if you think about, again, you have to reach across sliding carriage, that part is fairly light. So dealing with a whole bunch of those is not that big of a deal. But what happens when you have to stand back several feet from the saw and then you have to push that whole 8 feet by? Now, all of a sudden, you're kind of having to do a little bit of forward and back walking, reaching out far with that right arm. Yeah. That's where it gets really uncomfortable. And most of my solid wood processing is done at that longer length. It's done at like an 8 or a 10 foot length versus like, cutting chunks off of pieces and then ripping them down. Can it be done? Absolutely. Do people do it every day? Absolutely. What I'm saying is if you have the space for both saws and you are going to be professional or semi-professional, you're going to love having both. Yeah. And they're going to pay for themselves really quickly. Not having to switch back and forth between blades on the 2 saws. Like my cabinet saw is mostly a rip saw. I mostly leave either a 40 or a 24 tooth blade on it. And then I can do dados on that. And all the all the other little odds and ends that you do on table saws. And the sliding table saw has a plywood. It's a very high ATB blade with a high tooth count and a negative hook, or is it rake? Rake or hook? I can't remember. That's really unprofessional of me. I'm sorry. It's hook. A negative hook, which leaves a cleaner cut, kind of top and bottom. It's a plywood cutting machine. Mm-hmm. Now, I even cross-cut solid wood on it occasionally, but again, I'm cross-cutting. So that high tooth count blade actually works well for that solid wood cross-cut.
But ripping, you would have to put...
otherwise you'd just be scorching the blade and scorching the wood and burn marks and the whole thing.
Yeah.
So having the 2 kind of allows some efficiencies, because there's less swapping back and forth between blades. One final consideration with sliding table saw is the carriage length. Mine is the smallest carriage length. And by carriage length, that's the thing that slides. Some people call it a wagon. Some people call it a carriage. Some people call it who knows what. I call it a carriage. That's the part that slides. It's just to the left of the blade. It's a big aluminum extrusion. That length, if you can fit a little longer, that's better. Mine is like, it's like 100 inches, let's just say. Okay. So your 96-inch piece of plywood, I can cut fully. Yeah. And that's great. But if you get a shorter stroke slider, they make them 6 feet. They make them all the way down to like 4 feet or something. I think Hammer and Felder sell some short stroke sliders. The 90-degree fence on that sliding carriage needs to be removed every time you need to cut something longer than the length of the carriage. And then it would need to be reinstalled to go back into that cross-cutting mode. So you're going to have a lot of switching back and forth if you don't have the space for that longer slider. Mm-hmm. I would estimate that 95% of professional shops here in America have a 10-foot slider. And that would allow them to cut a 10-foot length without having to remove that 90-degree fence at the end of the sliding carriage. So that's a consideration too. They also make those welded steel attachments that go on the side of a cabinet saw. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Excalibur. Exactor. I think SawStop actually makes one for their their saws now. I think Powermatic makes one too. Those are very good, but again, you're going to be removing that fence and putting it back on frequently. So
and
that's
you're not going to get a full sheet's worth of throw out of it.
No, those have like a 60-inch stroke or something like that, which you could at least cross-cut, and that's not nothing. But again, oceans of real estate. I mean, they just take up a ton of space. Yeah. So if I could just diverge from this guy's question just super quick. Go for it, yeah. There's two other options. There's another thing out there called a vertical panel saw, which is, it almost looks like a sheet goods storage cart that you might see on YouTube or whatever, except it's made out of steel, and then there's a saw that goes up and down on them. Yeah, it almost looks like a circular saw. Yeah. Yeah, they have kind of those smaller ones that you actually use like a Milwaukee circular saw motor bolted on there. Yeah. Those were good. I had one of those when I first got started, and I bought it for like $200 off Craigslist. And then I had another vertical panel saw that was made by Holzer. It was like a 1205 model, and it was like 14 feet long and 6-something feet high was the cutting envelope. And it would like lengthwise cut all 14 feet like perfectly straight. Yeah. And the thing took up maybe 3 feet off the wall and then the 14-foot length, and you could cut plywood on that all day. Yeah. I had one of those for a while, so that would be a consideration. Look into a vertical panel saw. The other option is if this guy's kind of semi-pro, look into a CNC. Ugh. If you're reasonably intelligent with a computer, cutting cabinet parts on a CNC is the way to go. Is it really getting there? It's a little slower than the panel saw, unless you buy a real expensive machine that can cut very quickly. Mm-hmm. But it's completely brainless. Like you can just sit down in front of your computer, program out all your parts, and then just start loading sheets, hit go, and the thing beeps when it's done, and come back, unload the parts, label them, and then put another sheet on and hit go. Yeah, slow doesn't necessarily matter when you're not operating, right? Correct. So if the machine takes, I'm going real high, let's say it takes 20 minutes or something to cut out all the parts on one sheet. Well, during that 20 minutes, you should be doing something like edge banding parts or cutting out stuff for your doors, or whatever it happens to be. If you're not smart enough to be able to figure out some other way to, the tool is working and I'm working too. It's kind of like having an employee. Yeah. The CNC machines are cheap enough now to where 1 or 2 jobs and it's paid for itself. So okay, so slider versus CNC. You can only have one. Where are you going? CNC. Yeah. Really? Well, I mean, I guess let me just put a caveat there. If I could have a CNC and a cabinet saw, I'd be good on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what. And you know what? Even cabinet saw, like I could get away with a little job site table saw at that point because you're just ripping solid wood pieces into parts. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't want to keep this question going endlessly, but I keep having questions.
Mike Farrington, professional woodworker, do you ever use a power feeder for ripping a ton of stock like that,
Yeah. So if I have more than like, let's say 200 feet, yeah, I would set up a power feeder.
Okay.
The other time that I always set up a power feeder is when I'm doing long bevel cuts. Fireplace mantles are kind of like a thing that I do. For a while, actually, when I had in my first couple of shops, they were just tiny. I did like mostly fireplace mantles and other like that might be a fireplace mantle with little built-ins on the side, but they're smaller projects that would fit into a smaller shop. So one of the kind of popular things these days is the big like chunk of wood above the fireplace. Mm-hmm. And some people want a really rustic look. Okay, then you'd go get the old railroad beam or whatever and stick it up there. Some people like a little cleaner, more modern look. In that cleaner, more modern look, I actually do that as all bevel cuts. So if there's a top, bottom, front, left, and right, all of those are all beveled on all sides. And I glue them together with the good old fashioned, blue tape thing and then flip it over, put the glue in and then fold it shut. Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing those types of bevel cuts, I use a power feeder. Nothing will give you a better bevel cut than a power feeder because it's constantly pushing down and constantly pushing forward.
Yeah.
And then it's also safer. Like the bevel cuts are probably the most kickback prone, especially with that little off cut as the blade's all the way over. That little sliver wants to fall off and the blade just wants to grab the thing and just harpoon you with it.
Yeah.
So you put the power feed on, I'm standing on the other side of the saw as the piece is coming off. And if it's going to kick back, it's going to throw it at my miter saw and I'm completely out of the way. So I use a 1/4 horsepower, 3-wheel power feeder, forward and reverse. It's got a couple of speeds. You got to change the gears to change the speeds. Okay, fine. Okay. The 1/4 horsepower is just big enough to have power. It's just small enough to where one person can easily lift it on and off of a tool.
Okay.
And I just have it bolted onto a chunk of wood and I clamp the chunk of wood to the side of my table saw.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Do you ever use it at the joiner?
I've not. Joiner's the only place I haven't used it. I've used it at the bandsaw and the table saw and the shaper, of course, but I've not used it at a jointer. If I have that much wood to joint, I might order it surfaced on one side.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's all right. Wow. There's so many considerations that I would never.
How about one more pro tip?
Yeah.
When you get your power feeder, it's going to come with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many wheels it has. Take those off and throw them in the garbage can. Order up soft wheels. And if you just go on the internet and do your Google search or whatever, power feeder wheels or something like that, get ones with a softer durometer, whatever that is. Just get the softest ones that you can get. They have a little more squish to them, and then they're going to grip parts better. It's annoying when you don't have the power feeder set up just right and the part sort of goes and then slips and then goes and then slips. Mm-hmm. A grippier wheel kind of gives you a little bit more play and to grab onto that the workpiece and push it through. So soft wheels for your power feeder, get them.
Awesome. How many wheels do you recommend?
3 wheels good. The 3 wheels actually great because you can take off the center and it can straddle a table saw blade. So It's kind of got one on the way in, one on the way out. 4 is nice too, but the problem is that it starts getting heavy. So it's going to be 100, 125, 150 pound thing that you're going to have to take on and off of your saw unless you have the space to have a completely dedicated rip saw. But the 1/4 horsepower with the 3 wheels, maybe a 60, 70 pound thing. So it is reasonable for one person to lift on and off. And they're all 110 volt, just plug it into the outlet kind of deal.
Huh.
So yeah.
Interesting. All right, let's take a quick break.
One of my favorite books is Mike Pekovich's The Why and How of Woodworking, a simple approach to making meaningful work. Right now, it's available for purchase in the Taunton store. Use promo code PODCAST for 30% off anything and everything.
This next question is from Tyler. And I'm gonna make this one the short version. Let's see. I know Mike Farrington uses a biscuit joiner often in his video. I tend to personally make a few large projects a year, and I've tried traditional mortise and tenons every which way. Drill, chop, drill press mortise attachment. It isn't that bad, even though I know you guys complain about them, and even a router. I don't mind any of those, so I'm not sure if I'm missing out on the domino craze, or is there something I missed? even though Ben is the only one who seems to have a domino. I'm not. Mike has one. So there's a debate between, and there was another one that we came in specifically asking for your opinion. I don't have it, but what is the difference for you? When are you using a domino? When are you using a biscuit joiner? And I know you have the lamello. And when are you using traditional mortise and tenon? And I think you even have a fancy dowel, double dowel thing or something. So
Yep.
where are those differences coming in for you? Because they seem like a similar.
Just to get it out of the way, I have a thing. It's called a Maffel Duo Dowler, and it drills 2 holes on 32 millimeter centers, and it also has a track with reference points, so you can jump along at 32 millimeter reference points, I guess you'd say. I use that exclusively for drilling shelf pin holes, drilling hinge, just all of the random like cabinet hardware stuff. So I don't use that a ton for joinery. Okay,
so I think I learned this from you back in the day when they were making machinery. 32 millimeters was the closest they could get to 2 spindles together at the time. And that became like the European standard for, and all drawer hardware is based off of 32 millimeters, right?
Almost all hinges, drawer slides, shelf pin, just all the Festool stuff works on some multiple of 32 millimeter. And that could be 96 millimeter, that could be 32 millimeter. Like the MFTs are 96 millimeter centers. So I think that how it works is they would put 2 spindles close to each other, and then they would have a gear in between them. So one is spinning clockwise, one is spinning counterclockwise because they're being driven by the same gear. Then another gear, then another spindle. And the diameter of those little drive gears, 32 millimeters, was about as close as they could get them without sacrificing reliability. Because as they got closer, the diameter of those drive gears would have to be real small and very few teeth, which obviously means they would break. So anytime you're dealing with cabinets, I can't sell stuff to my clients in metric, but I have to use metric because of that 32 millimeter system. So I do a little bit of conversion, which is kind of annoying, but it's just part of the game.
Yeah. Okay, so the Duo Dowel, strictly for drawer parts and things like that.
Yeah, it's for all of that 32 millimeter stuff.
So the debate is really between a biscuit joiner and the domino. When are you you pull out the lamello more often than anything, I'd say.
Yeah, it's faster and it's easy and it's cheap. The tool itself is like ungodly expensive. I want to say the model that I have in the newest version is like $1,300 or something like that. So it's a chunk of money. But there's a very subtle thing that I don't know that everybody gets about it. I can raise the cutter up and down 2 millimeters in 1/10 of a millimeter increments, and it's in detents, so they snap into place. So I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that blade, and because it's a $1,300 tool, it's been made really well. The machining is like glorious. So those adjustments are consistent. I can move 5 and come back 5, and I know it's exactly where it was.
That's incredible.
So the other thing about the lamello, and I don't get paid by them. They didn't give me a tool. They had nothing. But if you can afford one, mine is. I bought it off one of the first guys I worked for. He used it his entire career. I've had the thing for like 10 years now. So we're talking, it's gone through an entire career and 10 years of another one, and it's still just fine. Yeah. Like it works perfect. So yeah, you get what you pay for kind of a thing there. I use it every single day, just about. And I haven't had to even do the bushings on it or brushes, not bushings, but brushes. I haven't even done the brushes on the motor. So yeah, it's a quality piece. When it comes specifically to the biscuit joiner versus the domino, I pretty much use the biscuit joiner 100% of the time with one exception. Here it is right here. The domino cuts a narrower joint. Okay. It can be very narrow.
Okay.
A biscuit joiner, I want to say it's like 1 3/4 inches is the narrow, like a number 0 biscuit.
Yeah.
Is like 1 3/4 inches wide or whatever. So, and it might even be a little wider than that. So essentially, if you're making a lot of doors, biscuit joiner is terrible.
Yeah.
If you're making a lot of parts where they're long joints, that's where the biscuit joiner shines. It shines in alignment and glue ups. When I'm gluing a nosing onto a shelf, when I'm gluing a face frame to a cabinet and I need that to be a concealed seam, a couple of biscuits. And the great thing is you can be like wildly inaccurate with it and it still will align in that one dimension. So it's very accurate in one dimension and then very inaccurate in the other dimension. And that can give you speed because you don't have to care so much about how exact your pencil lines are. When you start breaking out the domino, I realize they have a tight and a loose and an extra loose setting. I get all that. Still, I'm probably 3 times faster with a biscuit joiner than I am with a domino. So I have all of the tools. I have every tool you can imagine. I've got the big domino, the small domino. I've got the lamello, just the whole deal. I use the lamello 100% of the time until the joint that I needs to be narrow, if that makes sense. Now, it's also important to note that like if you go on YouTube or whatever, the echo chamber of like gobbledygook that gets spit out there is horrible. And the biscuit joiner apparently adds no strength to a joint. And that's not the answer. The answer is it doesn't add a ton of strength, but it does add some strength. And it's great for long connections, again, like a face frame to a cabinet side or just anything along those lines. So I bring that up because the only other time I would use the domino is when I really need some extra strength. If something is going to be cantilevered real far, I probably wouldn't use the biscuit joiner for that. I would break out the domino because it does have a slightly stronger joint.
You've really got me rethinking this because there have been so many times that I have built, a plywood case and dominoed them together and thought, well, I'm really not adding all that much strength here. The case, once the back is in, is going to be as strong as it will ever need to be. I'm doing it for alignment purposes. And a biscuit is more than enough for anything.
It absolutely is. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video on this and I'm sure somebody will steal this idea. If you just take just 2 pieces of plywood and not something really nice like Baltic birch, but just your average kind of user grade plywood or MDF or particle board, drill 2 or 3 or 4 dominoes in it and take and just collapse the joint and then drill the same number of biscuits and try and collapse the joint. The biscuit actually is stronger in that regard. Because of the density of the beech tenons, they just tend to push the plywood out.
Okay, yeah.
Because there just isn't enough thickness there. It just breaks the plywood out and it breaks it out small, like the width of the domino.
Yeah.
So in that regard, biscuits are actually stronger. But in both situations, you don't really need the strength. The cabinet isn't as strong as one single joint. It's as strong as the whole system together. Like we've all put cabinets together and then like before the back is put on, the thing is so wobbly. There's no joinery you could do at the corners that would actually make that strong. It needs the sides. It needs the back. It needs just all of it. The cabinets really are a system. And that goes from solid wood furniture all the way through just putting stuff together for your shop where you're just banging it together with nails and stuff. So, if you're just using it for alignment, a biscuit joiner is great. But if you have a domino and you can justify the expense, it is a neat tool. It's a little slower. It has some advantages, but it's also a ton of money.
Yeah.
So, how do you make that decision? I would say this, if I was on a budget and I was a hobbyist woodworker, I would have a cheap biscuit joiner, and cheap is, that's probably a more cost-effective, but still decent quality tool. I had the Porter cable, whatever, what is it, a 5.5, whatever. I had that.
I don't think
joiner.
they're making it anymore.
No.
Well, look it up.
My heart just broke. Well, anyway, to those listening, I had one of those for 10 years and it was a fine tool. It worked great for me. I used it all of the time. I would have that in a router. That's my budget setup. I would use the router for mortises. And then I would use the biscuit joiner for just random connections. If you have a little bit of budget, I'd have a router, I'd have a domino, and I'd have a biscuit joiner too. So
they are making the 5.57 still.
Okay, boy,
we're good. We're good.
Okay.
It's the
all's well with the world here.
Yeah. It's the Porter Cable router that has gone away.
Yeah, Porter Cables stopped making a bunch. They used to make a router called the 310, which was their palm router, and that was the most glorious tool ever made, and they don't make those anymore.
Yeah, that was it was just a big cylinder, right?
Yep, and it just fit perfectly in your hand. It was short. Yeah, it was awesome.
Well, it's because they never died. And they just kept going, and they made X number, and they're forever in circulation now.
I have 5 of those personally, and a couple of them, the cords are so bad, you have to pinch the cord with your hand to get it to turn on.
You should do something about that, Mike. You're a clever guy. Come on.
One of these days. Yeah, one of these days I'll get on that.
Well, pretty soon, one of your kids will be able to wire it up for you, and
yeah,
Yeah,
and they're kids are so good with electronics. I'll have them doing the software updates on all my computers. I won't have to do those anymore.
Yeah, my kid was actually updating my mom's phone the other day, and it was the most cliche thing, but it was adorable nonetheless.
Outsourcing, man.
So a cost-effective biscuit joiner and a router. That's if you're getting going.
And I like the Porter
combo.
Cable biscuit joiner because I've used it, and I like. Is it the DeWalt 621? Is that their medium-sized plunge router?
Is with the handles on the T-grip handles, kind of?
Yep.
That all-in-one. Not the
I
combo.
love that router.
Yeah.
I've had 3 of those. I'm down to 2 now. That router you can do everything with, from mortises to edge stuff to dados, because it has a flat side on one of the on the base, so you can reference that against a straight edge. And so that combination would be really good. I've had a bunch of other people tell me they've had good luck with the Makita biscuit joiners, and the DeWalt is another good one. And I think Makita has a battery-powered one, which would be cool if you're in the Makita system and you already have that charger. That would be reasonably convenient and something to look at as well. So, for a few $100, you'd be able to get yourself a nice router and a biscuit joiner. And if you were clever and could shop around on Craigslist or Facebook or whatever, you might be able to get it used for even less than that.
Yeah.
And that would be my budget go-to.
Yeah. I actually just picked up a DeWalt biscuit joiner for not much. All right, let's see. Next question. All right. From Adam. All over the internet, everyone seems so rushed during a glue up. I agree that a glue up is a bit stressful, but am I the only one who uses Titebond Extend glues? It has a lot longer working time. Sure takes a lot longer to set, but I always try and set up my glue up so that it can set overnight. I'm not a pro, so what would change things? Perhaps. It is a bit harder to find, but I think, but that's just because nobody uses it. Am I missing something everyone else knows? So for me, the question is not necessarily about Titebond Extend. I'm sure it's great, but what is your go-to process or your go-to workaround for tough glue ups?
Sure. I don't think this guy, to answer his question directly, I don't think he's missing anything. I think he's found something that works for him. And in woodworking, there's so many just solutions in search of problems that sometimes it's kind of hard to sift through and find the one that's going to work for you. It sounds like this guy's done that. For me, I just keep a couple of glues around. My go-to just normal user grade glue is Titebond 3. And I like it because it dries much darker than the other glues. The color is much closer to cherry. It's much closer to walnut. Mm-hmm. It's actually a little dark for something like maple. I don't do a ton of work in maple. So for me, the color helps a little bit. That's one. It has the longest open time of the traditional wood glues. And they call it waterproof. Nothing's waterproof. Yeah. Water turns everything to dust if given enough time. But it's water resistant enough to where you could use it for your outdoor stuff or whatever. So I like Titebond 3. That's my normal stuff. I just use that all the time. I buy it by the gallon and I pour it into a little bottle and it's great. For a little longer working time, like say I'm gluing up a case, I go to polyurethane glue. I happen to use the Gorilla Glue just simply because I can get it right down the street.
You do?
I get it in, yeah. I get it in the 16-ounce kind of sort of semi jugs. And I like that because on a colder day, that stuff is great. Like you get a 30-minute working time out of that easily, but then you're not totally destroyed on the clamp time. Like the problem with the super long open wood glue stuff is that, yeah, you're clamping it overnight. Whereas with the Gorilla Glue, it's like 2 hours and it's done. So if you hit something in the morning, you clamp it, you roll out to lunch and come back, you're ready to unclamp and keep working. Now, the downside is it foams. Okay, you got to be careful. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But pro tip on that, clean up the squeeze out. If you're going to use polyurethane as the finish, if you just clean the foam out of so let's say you're gluing up a case and there's a little bit of foam on the inside of your joint, cleaning squeeze out of that is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just clean most of it out and leave the rest of it there. And if you're using polyurethane as a finish, that little bit of squeeze out that's left just completely disappears because, as it turns out, polyurethane glue and polyurethane the finish are essentially the same thing.
So the same solvent. The solvent is universal between the two of them,
and the color and all that. So when everything dries, you won't see that squeeze out. As long as it's not like a big glop, the squeeze out just disappears.
Huh. So,
and then, then when I need a ton of open time, I just use epoxy and I just buy that in whatever open time I think I need. I think I've got some stuff in there now that's 2 hour. And if you can't get whatever it is that you're gluing together glued in 2 hours, that's kind of your problem.
Yesterday I had a glue up and, my wife and son had come home and my son came in to the shop and my wife poked her head in. She goes, "He's gluing up, leave him alone." And I said, "No, it's fine. We're good. Just what's up?" And she goes, "No, I want no part of this."
Yeah. Right. You're going to teach him some words he shouldn't know.
Well, and half an hour later, I go into the house. I said, "You were right. That went a little squirrely. It was probably best no one was around." And she goes, "Yeah, that's like that's being a woodworking partner 101. When the glue's out, leave the room." But all of that to say, I have been using Type-On 1 almost exclusively for like 2 years now, and thank God, I in the middle of this, I was getting ready to glue up and I said, "You know what? I think this is going to be a little rush." So I went to Type-On 2. I don't have any 3 lying around. I don't have any Extend lying around, but I think I need to get just a small bottle just for moments like this because 2 was even a little bit rushed. And then I have 24-hour epoxy and I didn't want to wait for that. But
that's a commitment to a lifestyle when you break out the epoxy.
Yeah. So polyurethane for your slower.
That's like my mid-level glue.
I'm telling you, I think it went through a phase where polyurethane was seemingly universally knocked for glue, and slowly I'm starting to see Craig Thibodeau uses it. Adrian Ferrazzuti's using it. There's now Mike Farrington uses it.
Well,
Tim
the other
Coleman?
2 guys are 3 of the top furniture makers right there. I mean, Craig is absolute genius. So is Ferrazzuti. I mean, those guys are like, and Coleman, of course. So pretty much like if, they say I use it, I go, yeah, me too, man.
No, this is 4 fairly unimpeachable sources now. So I think I need to buy a bottle of Gorilla Glue or Type-On polyurethane next time I'm in the store too.
Yeah, and I like those because just get a small little guy of it. They make little 4-ounce ones. It's $7 or something like that, and it doesn't take a lot of it. And glue is. I mean, you could probably get a scientist on here who's like a glue scientist, and you could do like an 8-hour podcast on glue. There's a lot of choices. My solution has been to just have a couple, use them a lot, get to understand them, and stick with them. Yeah. And I don't know. There's so much to experiment on that for me. I've done a little bit of experimenting in glue. I like these. I know why I like them, and I know when I use each one.
Yeah. I have a whiteboard over there with ideas, and it actually says episode with somebody from Type-On and episode with somebody from West Systems. Yeah. Because I actually do want to geek out with someone over glue sometime.
Well, I have a dream one day. I want to build a wooden boat, and those are all coated in epoxy. And it's that ultra long open, like the 24-hour dry time stuff. And I would be interested in any information on that subject, because it's funny. I look at the wooden boat and I go, yeah, that looks pretty easy to build. And then I look at the finishing process. I'm like, okay, now there's where I would stub my toe.
Yeah. I had a weird epoxy moment, and I thought, oh, I wish I could call somebody from West, and then was like, wait, you should make this happen. There are other people who want this. So
they take your calls.
We'll get on that. I can make it happen. I know Mike Pekovich. You're not one for hide glue or any of those other variants of like liquid hide, slow setting and whatnots.
I have tried the Tight Bond. It's I guess Franklin. It says Franklin Tight Bond on it. They call it liquid hide glue. I've used that. I think the stuff is wonderful. It has a great slipperiness to it that just really allows mortise and tenon type or like dovetails to just slide together. Sometimes the wood glue will really work against you in that situation. Yeah. I don't know. I have a feeling if I get to make some more furniture, all solid wood type stuff, that might work its way into my shop a little more readily. I've gone through a few bottles of that, and it also has a nice dark color that works well with anything from, walnut, mahogany, kind of darker type stuff. And the slipperiness of it, I could just say is really nice. I'll say this. I don't think anything bonds wood as good as wood glue. It bonds like on a molecular level. You've seen all the tests where they edge glue two boards together, smash it across the thing. It never breaks at the glue line. I mean, this stuff is unbelievable. I'll say this about hide glue. It feels a little, and that isn't the like pot melted double boiler stuff. I'm talking stuff that you squeeze out of a bottle that they call hide glue. It feels a little brittle to me. Just a little bit brittle. Like I think if you did a slightly loose mortise and tenon with those and started wiggling it, I think you'd be able to break it free. I think with epoxy or with wood glue, I do not think you would be able to break it free.
Are you the type who, like I know Pekovich, he always says, oh, I always want to try this glue. I want to try that glue. But there's too many variables going on in everything already. And the one thing that he knows is that he doesn't have to worry about, I think his go-to is Type on 2 or whatever, whatever your go-to is, they're like, we all know they're all stronger than the wood, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
But it seems like woodworkers are very, very, very hesitant to try any new glue. Are you that way?
No, I would try everything, but I wouldn't put a ton of time into it. So like I also use other glues, CA glue, hot melt glue is great for just holding random stuff together. Yeah. So I use a lot of glues. I'm just sort of talking about my main glues. I like trying new stuff. If you see my tool collection, I don't need all those tools. I just like to have them and goof around with them and understand them. I learn a lot by restoring them. Same thing with anything. I try different woods, different glues. I heard, and I'm going to quote him wrong, but one of my favorite economists, his name is Russ Roberts, and he says in economics, he has very strong beliefs that are weakly held. And I feel the same way about woodworking. I'm just a dummy in a garage I've got some experience and stuff, but like I don't know everything. I don't even know if my ideas or opinions or anything are right. I like to try and keep that mindset because it keeps me learning. And that really is the only thing that will keep you interested in woodworking through the course of many, many, many years or decades. It's always fun to learn something new. I'm always happy to be proven wrong. And if I go over and see, I'm like, oh, I've never seen this glue before. And I take it off the shelf and use it. And it's glorious. Well, out goes the other one, or maybe I'll keep the other ones too. And I'll start using this new glue. So when it comes to that type of stuff, I try not to be too opinionated. I mean, and maybe it sounds like that when people are listening to me talk. I speak with some authority, but I think my actual, like the position within me or whatever is, I'm happy to be proven wrong, because a better way to do something it's just that. It's a better way to do something.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can only learn those new things by grabbing that new bottle of finish or that new bottle of glue or whatever it happens to be.
Awesome. Dude, this has been great. I think that about covers it. I was going to read the outro thing, but I'll do that later. Dude, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. If anybody out there has not found your YouTube channel, let me just say this. I'll probably say this quickly in the intro too. We get asked we get asked all of the time, what YouTubers do y'all love? And the best answer is, the YouTubers we love are the ones that we eventually find a way of working with. We've got Tamar from 3x3 Customs on in the magazine now. These are the people that we love, and there's a reason why. It's because Mike's information is fantastic. It's entertaining, but it's not just entertaining, it's solid information. And when we see that, we reach out and do what we can to include their opinions. So Mike, thank you for being a part of the podcast and the website and the magazine and all that. And,
Well, the pleasure is all on this side of the table. It's really an honor to be involved with Fine Woodworking. I've been a fanboy since, late 90s. And just to kind of see some of the words and projects and things that I've done in the magazine is completely awesome. And, YouTube is an interesting place. The freedom, it's the low barriers to entry. There's so much that's good about it. However, there can be some challenges with that. And sometimes you get less than perfect information. And that's my channel too. I'm no perfect
Ours
guy.
as well. There's definitely, yeah.
So, but one of the things I can say is that if you start to see information in a lot of different sources, that information has been vetted by more than one set of eyes. If I come up with some wacky idea, I can make a video and have it up on YouTube tonight. Doesn't mean it's a good idea. Doesn't mean it's safe. It doesn't mean it's anything. Just means it's on YouTube. It could be entertaining and it would get a lot of views. But when it comes to good woodworking information, when I see stuff in Fine Woodworking, I know at least a handful of editors. It's gone around the table. It's been passed across the cubicle. Like a couple of people have at least kind of vetted it. So when you start seeing people on YouTube and in Fine Woodworking, I think that there's a certain, I don't know, what's the word? Like there's just a certain authority that would come with that information. And so I feel like for me, having some of my stuff in Fine Woodworking kind of gives me a little bit of stroke. And I'm very proud of that versus just a guy with a YouTube channel. So, for that, I can't thank you guys enough.
Well, it's just, I've been a fan of yours for all the way back to, I'm going to try and make up a date that you might have started doing it. 2017.
Yeah, I think it was September of 17.
Ah, okay. Well, I was probably on board early 2018.
Yeah.
But,
so when you start your YouTube channel, you put out a video, it would literally get 9 views in 2 months. Yep. And then unless you're carrying a big name in with you. And I don't think I really got any significant actual like measurable views until sometime maybe in March or April of 18. So I would have started in September of 17. So yeah, you were there from pretty early on, and I do appreciate your viewership. Thank you very much.
Well, just if anyone's ever looking for a great perspective while being entertaining and passing along great information, check out Mike Farrington's YouTube channel. I'll link to it, of course. And thanks again for being on.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Again, thank you to Mike for being on the show, and thank you to you for listening and supporting Fine Woodworking and what we do around here. If you have any questions you'd like answered on the show, please send them into shoptalk@taunton.com and follow us on social media and all that stuff. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.